Welcome to Living Room Local, local theater company's monthly series that places you in the living rooms of leading artists for conversations that deepen our understanding and appreciation of their work. If you are not already a Season 10 member, become one today and join us for all 10 of these exciting conversations. Now, we are pleased to welcome Alexandra Grant. Alexandra Grant is a Los Angeles-based artist who, through an exploration of the use of text and language in various media, including painting, drawing, sculpture, film, and photography, probes ideas of translation, identity, dislocation, and social responsibility. Grant's work has been described as a radical collaboration, that is, work made in collaboration with the text and work of other writers and artists, and is often participatory and ongoing.
So you can have a more in-depth reading or relationship to the text if you want it, but that if you don't have a connection, what you add to the project still points in the direction that we're all trying to go together, which is sort of how do we paint a collective, a communal shared dream based on a Hélène Cixous text.
She has collaborated with writers as diverse as playwright and philosopher Hélène Cixous, hypertext pioneer Michael Joyce, actor and writer Keanu Reeves, and been inspired by Sophocles Antigone and the poetry of Wislawa Szymborska. We are pleased to welcome visionary artist Alexandra Grant to Living Room Local for a conversation on her creative process, her philanthropic work, Grant Love, and her newest exhibition, Telepathy is One Step Further Than Empathy, at the Orange County Museum of Art. Please welcome Alexandra Grant and local theater company's founding artistic director, Pesha Rudnick.
Hi, here we are.
Hi, Pesha.
Hello, you can hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Great.
I was given lots of little notes to make sure that you can hear. So if you can't, give me a little. How are you tonight?
I'm good, thank you. How are you today?
I'm good. Isn't it funny? We've got this awesome time travel machine. And Meredith was mentioning being, sort of chilly and cold where she is in New York. And I'm like schwitzing hot in California.
In the sunlight, it's great.
In the sunlight, yeah. Well, hello to our audiences, our viewers. Hi, if you're new to Local Theater Company, my name is Pesha. I'm the artistic director here at Local, and I'm going to dive in because we have an hour together, and I have 48 questions for you. So I do not. I do, but I somehow managed to get down.
You've narrowed the list down a little bit.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to hold them up. And but for our viewers, the way these living room locals work is that we're going to talk for about 25 minutes, 30 minutes, and then we're going to take a virtual tour of your exhibition. And then we're going to invite some guests on to ask you some questions and kind of, launch us into the rest of our day over here into your evening.
Sounds great.
Does that work for you? Oh, good. Okay, so I'm going to just dive in. So as a theater person or as a theater director, when I first meet a new play, and at Local we do exclusively new work, and I'm getting to know a piece of work or the playwright who's written the piece of work. I always start by looking at the characters and defining or sort of looking through the moments in their life. And some of these moments are big moments that create kind of seismic change and choices in a character's journey. And sometimes they're little tiny moments that have ripples and that ripple out. And so my first question for you, as a way of sort of getting to know you and your background, is if you don't mind sharing, when was the moment that you knew you were an artist?
This is such an interesting question. And I get asked it in different ways, it seems fairly regularly. It's like, I think as a child, one is so creative, and so one is an artist. I always felt sense of play and adventure, and I liked doing experiments in the kitchen, for example. Like I was very curious about, could you grow popcorn? Like what things could you grow? My mom was, what are these crazy things? So I had this very experimental, sort of free way of playing as a child. And then I kept that inside of me, that idea of like the innocent playfulness of a child. And that sort of morphed as I studied art in high school and in college into something that was more formal, that was given a language, that was taught art history and history of film, and so I think there was a professionalization of a very playful child's experience that's become almost like I would say being an artist as an adult, it's like having a second childhood, and that you protect sort of that curious way of being in the world. That's not childish anymore, but it's childlike. So I guess the answer would be that I became a professional when I began studying art more formally in high school, college, and then graduate school. So
yeah, and in terms of sort of being a professional, when in that journey did you start turning words into pictures, and when did words and text sort of emerge as your way of?
Always so interesting to me. This is like a very back to childhood. I have this very strong memory of trying to understand the concept of God. I mean, I'm just going to go there with you, Pesha.
Let's do it.
I remember thinking, like, what came, because you would study, you're like 6 or 7 and you're lying in bed at night. And I was thinking, well, what came before, the dogs and the cats and the dinosaurs? Like, what came before? And I remember sort of working, like every night I would get a little further in my little mind's understanding. And I remember thinking, well, what came before God? And just thinking, but God is a word. So what came before the word? And so this idea of, and it was a very, a childlike understanding of it, but that play of like, can you have a concept without the word? And did the universe come? But we're using words again. So I think that that was sort of like a childlike wonder of like, how does our thinking work? And is it words that come before images? I mean, it's like the chicken and the egg. Which came first? So that curiosity of how narrative too and storytelling shape the images. And not to get people too excited, but when we do our exercise at the end, we're going to be looking at this exact idea, right? Like, so everyone get your pen and paper, but it's like what comes first, and we think we know what another person mean, what another group of people mean when they use a word, and in fact, that idea.
We have is that we have no idea. They're slippery. You used the word slippery to describe words in something that I read of yours recently, and I just keep circling that because that's so true. And even in plays, when we're watching them and we sort of think we're putting out one thing into the world, they're slippery out there in the audience, and we don't know how they're landing.
Well, and everyone is receiving it from where they're at in their lives, where they're coming from, their own culture, the kind of day they've had. So again, there's also like the role the recipient of the artwork plays, But I think, for me, that what I love about being a painter is that I can put an intention in, I can put words in the image, and it's abstraction because it's abstract language, but it's also abstract sort of space that I'm creating. And then I'll talk to someone and they'll have a theory about what the work is about. And it has absolutely nothing to do with what I thought it was about. But I love that moment, like I just remember when I first started showing my work and all the words were backwards. And I had the idea it was like sort of Alice in Wonderland, like being behind the mirror, looking out. Also playing with the idea of what happens when you can't read words, that your brain makes sense of it in a very different way. And I remember someone coming and saying, "You've painted exactly how it feels to be dyslexic." And I thought, I'm so I'm honored by that I could capture something for you that wasn't in my scope of my intention, but that's the surprise and the real pleasure, I think, of being an artist and creating something and finding a public for it.
And having it land for someone in a way that makes sense, right? The chaos of it suddenly making sense. Well, you just mentioned sort of not being able to read words or not knowing what they mean, but having this either visual or even just emotional experience about them. And we've talked before about the fact that you were raised in Mexico. Is that right? Mexico City, Spain, France. Is it Ohio where you were
Ohio,
also?
absolutely.
Ohio.
Born in Ohio.
Born in Ohio. But, and because of that, you spoke and you currently speak many languages. And so I'm curious about how the sort of image of various languages, how that helps you or how it influences how you see words or see text or see imagery and the impact that's had on your art.
You know, it's funny. I'm always amazed at how the brain is wired, you know, with language, and how, you know, as a kid, for example, I remember I couldn't remember the concepts of left and right. And I always got confused coming back to English from Spanish. So I had to learn that in Spanish, the word for left is izquierda. It's very long. In English, the word for left is the shorter word. So, you know, I'd have all these tricks to remember how to go between languages. And I'm very fortunate that I got to, you know, move between countries where I spoke both languages. But I remember the first experience of moving to France as a teenager and not speaking a word of French, and suddenly being sort of plopped down at age 12 in Paris, and, you know, having to figure out what things meant by sort of the signs. Learning to watch the TV was a great way to learn a new language, you know, listening to music. But that sense, you know, of, you know, the first time you get a joke in a language that's new to you, and it's like, it's such a relief, you know, because it's like, not only have you sort of mastered a basic sentence structure, but you've also kind of clued into cultural humor. So I like watching, you know, how a viewer, that could be me or it could be you looking at art, that how we make sense of all the clues around us, you know. And so, you know, obviously if you see a sign on a bathroom, you're going to learn that word. Or I always think of France, I just remember so, you know, the idea of the sale, like that there was a sale in a store. Like, you know, you just learn things through context, and you can tell, like, through graffiti that there's a, you know, sort of anger or a big emotion behind it. And there's so much you can glean, you know, from how things are written.
From it. Have you, in your art, or I'd say in the last 10 years or so, have you worked with non-English words in your paintings?
In the past, I've worked in Spanish before and translated works into Spanish and into French too. And that's fun to, you know, take a text. I can think specifically of a project I did with Michael Joyce, where I felt that the language of certain senses needed to be in different languages. And so I also welcome that mistranslation. I remember someone was looking at a painting of mine recently, and she said, well, that's terribly translated into Spanish. And I said, well, that's part of it, you know, that I want there to be a mistranslation, that I want, like, that response, that I sort of didn't get the wording. Well, that's not exactly what that means, she said. And I thought, that's great, but that's what I'm doing in taking words and making them into paintings. It's a mistranslation that then becomes something all of its own. And I feel that great permission. Hélène Cixous and I did a project, I think it was in the video in 2013, called The Interior Forest. And we did an interview at the end of the project. We'd done it in the United States. We'd done it in France, and I'd worked with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of people to draw her book. And she sort of turned to me in this interview and said, you know, Alexandra, it was never a forest. I said, what? She said it was a garden. It was a walled garden. And I said, Hélène, we've been working on this project for 3 years. Why didn't you tell me that I had turned your garden into a forest? And she said, well, I just loved the forest. That's part of how you made it yours, is that you made my garden, my walled garden, you turned it into a forest. And I thought, that's generosity of spirit, but it's also the wonderful thing that happens when you bring a collaborator into a process.
Yeah, and translate it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so glad you brought up that project, because I've been thinking about that project and the Ghost Town project, where you worked with like 600 people. 600 people created a mural.
Yeah, in Guatemala City.
In Guatemala, and
yeah.
I mean, I'm very moved by your work as an art activist, and I don't even know if that's the right word. I don't know if you call it art activist or community activist or advocate. But I'm really curious about how you think artists can create community right now, like community in such a Zoom-centric world that I know we'll move through it, but I don't know how much of this we'll lose. I think people are finding a comfort in it. So I'm curious, what do you think about?
It's so, when I think about those projects where I have invited in the past the public to come draw with me, and I think especially Ghost Town took place in the summertime in Guatemala City, and we were in a room with one door and a lot of fans and about 100 people drawing side by side. And when I think about that now, sort of we had water and snacks for everyone, and it was great because we would have, a gardener drawing next to an heiress, literally, and trying to connect their drawings. And we couldn't do that today with Corona, it just wouldn't be possible. So
no.
I think that idea of coming together can be done. There's a spirit of it, that could be done online through almost like a telephone game, you could honestly like do a drawing, send it on. But I think there's other cumulative ways of working that many people are discovering. I found Zooms just so revelatory, actually. There's an intimacy of looking into, I get to see into your house right now. That we get to share things, and those wonderful accidents that happen with someone walking by in the past. Or I was on a Zoom and I stood up and I forgot that I had my flaming red sweatpants on. Because I just jumped up to show someone something, and it was this moment of great hilarity. So I think it's these questions of, we have new boundaries and therefore new ways to break them or break through them, and humor is such a good way. But for me, it's been such a generative time to work in the studio. I've been able to be in Berlin and to sort of get to see and different art communities than mine in Los Angeles. And so in a way, it's continuing on smaller, more intimate scale to do exchanges with the hope of bringing people together again, but in new ways. So I have new love prints that we're going to launch here in Berlin, and new ways of bringing different communities together for me now in a more international way. And
that's exciting.
Yeah.
I know the 18th Street project pretty well, just from being raised in Los Angeles, and the sort of art access issue, for lack of a better word, is dear to my heart, around sort of making art accessible, not because everybody is necessarily an artist, but everybody deserves it, especially in a democracy where we're encouraged to express ourselves. So I think a lot about the constraints around not being able to reach our neighborhoods, and I'm thinking a lot about how do we reach neighborhoods, or how do we continue the arts access?
It's such a great question. I mean, like you, I think that art education is a civil rights issue. It's not about, an organization that I love in downtown Los Angeles. It's called The Heart of Los Angeles, and they have a youth orchestra. I mean, they do so many incredible things. And their visual arts program, when kids go to that after school, it's something around 96% of the kids graduate from high school, and then most of them go on to college. And it's immigrants to the United States, often parents who, didn't have that kind of formal education. And the goal of that arts education is is not to make everyone into an artist. It's, of course, if they want to be, to encourage that, but it's to, when we're talking about people who live in the lowest quintile of, the socioeconomic strata of the United States, it's to give creativity, to give confidence, to problem solve, and to give a safe space. And when you're taught to be creative, when you're taught to think, we've been joking about sort of being an idea volcano, that can help you problem solve, not just in terms of your creativity, but in your life. How can I get from here to there? And what, the possibility of having a formal education. So I agree. I think arts education is fundamentally something every child should have access to.
Yeah, we'll keep chewing on this question of how in this age, at least I am, about how we're gonna, keep working toward those projects when we're doing these on Zoom. All right, my brain is about to explode because I was actually just told that we have like 5 or 6 minutes until your tour. So I gotta speed this up. So to our viewers, for those of you who are just getting to know you, so not only are you a painter and you work in sculpture and photography, but you also are a publisher. And I got to immerse myself in some of your writing this week, which kind of blew my mind. So I'm not going to ask you 20 questions about this, but I do want to put a plug to this, because if you want to know Alexandra, this is what you need to read.
I'm a little scared.
Well, it is bizarre. It's weird. It's
so bizarre.
It's Handmaid's Tale. It's Kafka. It's funny. We know these people.
Yes. You know these people, exactly.
We work in theater, and let me tell you, this is real. And again, I won't ask you 30 questions, but I'm going to invite our audiences to go to your website and find it, because you got to read this. But tell me about the works that you're drawn to, because you don't publish, Rizzoli books. But what I love about it is that for me, I think it means that you get to be an audience member. So what kind of projects are you drawn to?
Oh, thank you for saying that. One of the things that I loved doing the Hélène Cixous project in Paris is that many people came and they would just watch us do the collective drawing. And I would say, well, why don't you join us? And they would say, mais je suis un amateur. The idea of like, I'm an amateur, in the sense I'm here to appreciate. Right. I love being an audience member. I love being a fan. I love being able to appreciate other people. It's why I've been passionate about teaching in the past. And I think publishing allows that opportunity to sort of immerse and give permission to, immerse myself and immerse our team in another person's thinking, and then to give permission to another artist to dream as big as possible what they would love to make a book about. And I think pretty much every creative person has at least one secret book that they have in their heart. And so, at Ex Artist Books, we've really developed a methodology of working with artists and creatives to help them express a vision that might not be, the most creative form of their vision. Whether it was, working with the playwright Sylvan Oswald, who had his secret book, High Winds, that has beautiful imagery by Jessica Fleischman, and what is that book? Is it graphic design? Is it theater? Is it LGBTQ?
Both.
It's everything. And in that story, I really loved it. It was like encouraging, well, why not make this into a performance? You imagined it as a book, but what could it be? And then for me, so what Ex Artist Books are is that possibility. Yes, it's going to be something that's on a shelf, and you can have the experience of haptic in your hands and reading it, and being comforted hopefully by it, or having your curiosity piqued. But what could that book become? The first year, 3 of our 4 books were performed live, which I hadn't anticipated. And then we've just done Asher Hartman's work, which is a grouping of 3 plays. And again, that connection, like your first question of like the written word into the moment in space and time with people. So, it really is imagining how a book becomes space, the moment, I like going back and forth, in the same way, like I like to go back and forth between the digital and the real, that for that, but then like the private moment to the public moment, how that works.
That is, I mean, you just described what it is to produce plays, because when we become devoted to a playwright, we don't know what's going to emerge, right? Sometimes it emerges as a movement piece. We've done pieces that have emerged as visual art pieces or as non-scripted. So yeah, this idea that they start here and who knows where they go. Okay, I want to talk briefly about Grant Love, the Grant Love Project, and then also just kind of set up for the Antigone series. So I'm just gonna. I've just been told I can take an extra couple minutes.
Great.
Yeah, because we're just hitting it. Like we had to find our StreamYard groove. So tell our viewers about the Grant Love Project. And then of course my question is going to be, how has philanthropy impacted you as an artist or a feminist? Like, how's it fulfilled you? How's it given back? Yeah.
I think, the Grant Love Project is a 10-year project. It's basically, I started out making editions of my own artwork and then selling those and donating the proceeds to charity. So it's very much part of my art practice. And then as it grew over time, I trademarked the love symbol, and it became a brand, and the brand is for philanthropy. So it's an art project that then donates proceeds, and so began partnering with different nonprofits to help fundraise. And more than fundraise, it's a friend raising project. So when we launch something, we always invite the audience to join us, and there's art collectors who've been getting all the prints from the last decade, and it's just so exciting to see the evolution and then the ability to invite other artists to interpret the work. It's been just so exciting, and I look forward to a future where I'm continually surprised by how this art project has evolved. But we've really been able to help a lot of different nonprofits over the years, and that's been very exciting to me. So the idea of philanthropy, it really comes down to how to be an artist, member of a civic society. So it's because I always feel that artists are asking for grants, asking for support, asking people to buy their work. And so for me, it was the question of, if we're always looking to institutions to support us, how can we give back? And how can we do that in small ways that are significant? So I've learned, that while the Grant Love Project is very, very, very small of what it gives compared to what a corporation or a large foundation can give, that even a small amount, $500 or $1,000, can make a difference. And again, it has to do with creating opportunity. I think that the opportunity of creating a book project can help an artist, find the next step on their path. And the Grant Love Project seeks to do that as well. It's really, to me, it's like a win-win exchange. Like someone gets a necklace and their site, that's going to support, the latest thing, which you got to see, and this maybe is the segue. I don't know.
It's getting there.
The Grant Love, we're doing our big pop-up shop at the Orange County Museum of Art. And that came about because curator Cassandra Koblenz and I were talking about about permanent collections of museums. And in the US, a study was done by ArtNet that between 2008 and 2018, only 11% of the work bought by the 26 leading museums were works by women. And when I last checked, there were more than 11% women in the world. So one is not being represented.
And even fewer by BIPOC women.
BIPOC, right?
It's like
women heartbreaking. So the question that I wanted to ask by having the Grant Love pop-up shop at the museum is, who's not here? Who's not invited to the table? And how can I, as an artist, create an artwork, which is the store, that will bring in more women, female identified artists, and hopefully women of color into the permanent collection? Because that needs to happen. And it can't be that as artists and creatives that we're depending only on the biggest philanthropists or the biggest collectors to make that change, that it has to be everyone being held accountable. So to me, it's a really exciting way of saying, I want to be part of this conversation. Artists should be part of this conversation. And there's a lot of different ways to do it.
Yeah. Nice. Well, it's funny when you were describing the sort of giving back to your community. I ask for money all the time. Allison and I, this is what we do, right? In theater. It doesn't make me self-conscious. I love inviting people to give to artists. But it's interesting because I've noticed that it generates happiness, and happiness is another slippery word, but it's I wonder about the chicken and egg. Like, do people feel good giving because of what they get back, or do they, in terms of giving to artists, or by giving, do they start to feel good? And I know there's lots of people who've done research on it, but there's an exchange of happiness and sort of proliferating of arts.
I think so. Something that I can't tell you the number of friends who had children where I walk into their kids' room and there's a love print on the wall, and I think this is so cool, right? Yeah. Like, it's really exciting to think that like that meant something to them. They want to have that value present for their children. People will get them for weddings, and it's like this idea of wanting to be supportive by giving as well as supporting, a nonprofit. So yes,
and others. Mm-hmm. Okay, now I am going to set up this Antigone because I have questions about Antigone, the series in general. So how long ago did you start this series?
Antigone, the voice of Antigone was in a series I started in 2010. It was called Sanctity of the Self. So it goes way back. And that body of work had to do with Adam Curtis's documentary about Freud. And I was really thinking about how do we begin to think about the self. And so I love that quote, "I was born to love, not to hate," seemed to me to be such a wonderful teenage moment, but it was one of many quotes. And as I worked through that body of work, I thought, the one here I like the most is Antigone. This is a cool teenage girl standing
rebel.
She's a rebel. In 2014, it was a different political moment in the US than it is now, or than it even was 2 weeks ago. And it just seemed to me that the issues around Ferguson, that there were a lot of issues that tied back to Antigone, but also this idea of like, what does it mean for a young girl to stand up to the state and say there's a higher law than the government, and it's in her mind, it's love and it's justice and it's standing up for what she believes in. And of course, that body of work really shifted when Trump was elected. It meant something very different to different people. And to me, I think there's been a really radical shift in how we communicate. The social media, the internet, there's sort of an anonymity that allows for there to be a lot more bullying and hatred and these things. Mm-hmm. And so it's like taking a stand against that. And you asked a connection to feminism, which I think is a really interesting one. Well, of course, she's a young girl. But I think when we are able to be compassionate, obviously first to ourselves and to our communities, but to people we don't know, and use these spaces, like, this exchange tonight is an exchange for compassion, then that's a very feminine way of being in the world. And I think that is part of Antigone's endurance as a story, is that even though it is not a comedy, it's very tragic, she does argue for standing up for a set of morals and ethics, that are transcendent. And she won't be a pleaser, which I love, She's not, her sister's saying, "But wait, are you sure?" And then the king's saying, "But we won't tell anyone you did it." And she's like, "No, I'm taking this stand, and I will be responsible for the consequences." So I think there's something so radically feminine and strong. But for today, what I imagine is that everyone can be an Antigone. It's not a gendered role. It's not an age role. It's not about race or creed. This is where the myth has touched so many cultures and has endured for so long.
Yeah, which you just answered my next question, which was why has it endured for so long? But given that I'm the only person in the room right now who's seen this show,
including me,
that's what I mean. And I've seen
show.
I know, and I've seen it twice now, which is so beautiful. This is just to set the set for everyone, because we're about to take a virtual tour. This is about 12, right? It's about a dozen pieces from this series that you have been working on for, I guess, as long as 10 years, but maybe as few as
I'd say the pieces in the show, there's pieces from 2009 to now. No, that's not true. 2014, 15 to now. Yeah.
And this is going to be a little heavy-handed, but I just want to draw the connection between the fact that your pieces are rebellious and big and gorgeous, and they are supporting, like Antigone is big and gorgeous and rebellious, and they're supporting the work of future women at the museum, which everyone's going to hear about in a little bit through the pop-up shop. Are you ready to take this virtual tour?
I'm ready to take a virtual tour.
Okay, here we go. I want to keep talking with you, but I'm sure we got to keep going. So, Misha, take it away. Let's take. Ooh. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Orange County. We are outside the Orange County Museum of Art and about to walk into Alexandra's exhibition. Hi, Alexandra.
Hi, everyone. Come on in. Hi, I'm Cassandra Koblenz, Senior Curator and Director of Public Engagement here at the Orange County Museum of Art. And welcome, you're in our lobby of our temporary location, ACMA Expand. The museum is actually at a very exciting moment in its life. We are building a new building, a new home designed by Pritzker Prize-winning architect Tom Main. You can see behind me a rendering of the new building. And then the first thing you also see when you walk into the lobby is our Grant Love pop-up shop. So you can have a quick peek at that, and then I will tell you all about it after we see the exhibition upstairs. Right now we have 6 exhibitions on view, and artists come from Korea. Some of them have relationships to Colombia and Chile, and Mexico City. And Alexandra's exhibition is also part of this carefully curated grouping of projects. So follow me and we'll see some more. Now we're walking into the space of Alexandra's exhibition. Behind me is the title wall. She and I thought very carefully about the title of this exhibition, and it speaks very much to her ideas around the concept of love. And she, has been working with this phrase from the Antigone play, this idea, I was born to love, not to hate. And for her, it's this idea, this moment in the play where Antigone is giving her life in exchange for giving her brother this righteous burial, and that idea of respect that is so important in that. But for Alexandra, she has a very interesting and specific idea of love and respect and reciprocity. And that phrase really kind of for her speaks to all of those things. So telepathy is one step further than empathy. Actually came from a conversation she had, and Alexandra, you can say much more about this than I can, with the writer Hélène Cixous. But Alexandra actually, she explained it to me in this really beautiful and simple way. The thought is that empathy is when you're sitting with someone and they express being cold and you feel for them, so you give them your sweater. Telepathy is when you're sitting with someone and they're expressing how they feel cold and you feel cold too. The experience is balanced, it's equal, shared equally by both people, and there's that kind of circuit of exchange that happens. So I have always been drawn to Alexandra's paintings. I should say that she and I have been in conversation for many years talking about working together, and it's been such a joy for me to see her work evolve and this series evolve and over the years. And it's really almost actually quite incredible how this work around I Was Born to Love, Not to Hate has just been so expansive for her. And you know, some of the things about her paintings that really draw me in is just the incredible kind of expression and language, and there's almost mini paintings within each painting. And she is able to use the language of paint, these kind of organic, bold, colorful gestures, butting up against these very geometric and orderly lines, and then with the text, bringing all of those things together to create this kind of somehow harmonious, bringing all of that chaos into this idea of harmony that I think speaks directly to this idea of the sort of balance and reciprocity. She's creating this world where these things exist simultaneously, and that's how life is, right? That the chaos and the messiness has to live alongside structure and order. And we feel that in each of her paintings, and there's so much of all of that, I think, that gets expressed. Another thing that I love about this exhibition is the way that she pairs the paintings with these neon works. The neon works are an extension of the painting series or body of work, but they do something else. They kind of push it further and really kind of draw the viewer in a different way. She's playing with this idea of mirroring and also even putting the viewer in the sort of inside of the artwork, right? Putting you on the position, you know, not from the outside looking in, but from the inside looking out. And we had a lot of fun, Alexandra and I, figuring out the installation and the combinations of works, the pink painting with the pink neon, for example. Another really favorite aspect of this project for me has been there are these neon works that are outside the gallery that kind of build even further on this idea, this sort of circuit of exchange and reciprocity, the way that the neons play with reversing your position of being on the inside looking out. You can literally be on the inside looking out at these neon works that are outside the gallery here. So there are these two outline forms, one that follows the outline of the pink neon and one that follows the outline of the blue neon, that are mirrored outside the gallery on this freestanding wall that viewers can see while they're inside. So again, there's this constant sense of reciprocity. And I told you I would talk about the pop-up shop downstairs and bring that back into this kind of idea, this concept. And for me, including the pop-up shop in this exhibition, I see it as a conceptual artwork. Even though, you know, Alexandra has been doing this Grant Love project for many years, the idea of exchange and reciprocity is key to that and the way it functions. So the pop-up shop and the objects in there, they're all multiples that Alexandra creates with other artists and supports them in the creation of these objects. So there's already some giving back in that. It's always a philanthropic endeavor. So any sales from the pop-up shop go to benefit many nonprofits, actually, that she's worked with. And so for our project, we decided it should benefit the museum. So here we are, back in our Grant Love pop-up shop. So as I mentioned, Alexandra has been working with her Grant Love project for many years, and she works with other artists to create these multiples, and they always benefit nonprofits. And in this case, we really specifically wanted to make something to benefit ACMA. And when Alexandra and I were talking about what makes sense and thinking through the concept of the exhibition, we had the idea to create a special acquisition fund to bring new work into the collection, because like so many works, our collection is lacking in diversity and women artists. And so this pop-up shop, the proceeds will fund the opportunity for the museum to buy new works by women identifying artists and to bring more diversity, like I said, into the museum collection. So it's an incredibly generous and generative project, again, completing this idea of this circuit and this exchange, and we're so thrilled to be able to do it.
I'm going to travel through time and say thank you so much for inviting us into your lab, your beautiful lab, at a time when so many of us are craving live experiences with art. We feel extremely privileged to have spent this hour with you and to be able to walk through this in real time.
And Alexandra, I can't wait for you to come and see the exhibition in person very soon.
Cool. Wasn't that neat?
That was amazing. Thank you so much for walking me through the show. I really appreciate it. And to Cassandra as well.
I know. She is so wonderful. We had such a fun time. So we have people who are backstage. We have a version of backstage here who want to ask you some questions. So I'm going to hold on my follow-up question just to make sure we can hear their voices. And the first person I'm going to invite is Lindy Rosario. She's a dramaturg. And Lindy, we're ready when you are.
Hello, I'm Lindy Rosario. Nice to meet you. I was curious, how do Sophocles' themes of social responsibility and the individual versus the state that appear in all of Sophocles' work really, how do those themes inspire your work and your creative process?
That is a great question. And I have to say that I'm not a scholar of Sophocles. I have read all the plays, and I identified with it more as an intergenerational series of stories when I think about Oedipus. And it's also a site for projection. And what I mean by that is when you think about Freud and you think about the Oedipal complex and you think about feminism and you think about, trying to have an antigonal complex, that what interests me is how each generation makes sense of those plays and those themes specifically for thought process that exist. So if in the 20th century, I feel like it was psychoanalysis really helped us make sense of Sophocles. That was the lens that people were looking at Greek myths, and I was brought up in a generation of deeply influenced by French feminism, and looking at how do feminists look at language, and then think about, are there other models that aren't patriarchal within the stories? Looking at Antigone as a heroine, is there a way that, to have an antigonal psychoanalysis, for example, so that the idea of the individual versus the social grouping, I think, has shifts, with every generation. And I don't know, it's interesting being in Germany even now. As a kid in Paris, I read, when I was about 12, Anouilh's version, right? And that, you think of it written under the occupation as a way of protesting the German invasion of France, and Antigone standing up to fascism, for example. So that's, a very different way of thinking about the play. And as a painter, for me, I'm thinking about timelessness, and the idea of when I put the phrase up and you can read it, but then you're also reading the painting and reading a kind of abstraction. It's thinking about the voice, right? I don't know how else to say, I guess when you're reading a play, because you're someone who's writing, you're thinking about, I'm writing down something that's going to be spoken, right? So what I'm trying to do is embody the spoken word of a character for the future, if that makes any sense. So it's like thinking, maybe it's a little less philosophically than your question. I don't know if I've just made a big mess of that, Lindy.
No, it was wonderful. Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I know that Michael is up next.
Okay, thank you for your question.
Hi there, Alexandra.
Hi, Michael.
I'm Michael Ensminger. I'm delighted to meet you. I'm an associate artist with Local, have been for some years, and I'm a photographer.
Oh,
and
great.
I do a lot of theater photography, and that's my favorite stuff to do, actually. When I'm not doing my art stuff, I also do art and installation and performance kind of stuff. So I just love your stuff and looking at all these things. And when I was asked to ask you a question, I was kind of overwhelmed because I don't know where to start. So I'm just going to go with something that hit me the most when I was looking at your stuff, and that was the Taking Lena Home. Just that the title alone, like I didn't know what it was about, but it just kind of, and then I'm reading about it, and I'm just fascinated because it was first of all just the way it happened. You didn't even know what was going to happen. It took years. You had that tombstone, and then you brought it in your studio for a few more years, and then once you put it up for sale, the avalanche started, and then all this stuff happened. And it's like, I relate to that because as an artist, I seldom know when I'm starting an art project. Like sometimes it's months in, and I go, "Oh, this is something," So that may be weird, but that's just how I am. And so when I saw that, I just thought, "Wow, I love this." It's just. So I was just wondering, was that sort of more of an exception, the way that came about? Because, and then it's two questions. How do you decide when your next project is going to happen? Is it very thought out for you, or is it totally dependent on the collaborator you're going with? And do you pick them because they're kind of in your wheelhouse and then things go? I don't know. So I think that's it. Okay.
That's an amazing question. I mean, thank you so much for having, I really appreciate the fact you watched the movie and it resonated with you. That means a lot to me. Some people ask me if I have a hobby or if I cultivate hobbies, and I say, I find hobbies dangerous because then they become work. Like anytime I learn something new, then it's like, so, the Lena Davis story, it's very dear to my heart. It did not begin as an art project. It began because I was driving as one does sometimes, across the country, and saw this stone that seemed so forlorn in this really strange antique store. And by the third time I visited it, the guy was like, $150. And then I was driving around with this tombstone, and both my parents were collectors of folk art. And so the way it was sold to me was that it was a piece of folk art. And then I didn't know what to do with it. I felt this incredible responsibility. And after a decade of sort of thinking, there's not a museum, there's not, there's these different things I wanted to try, and I couldn't find a home for it. I thought, well, why don't I put it the most visible place I can think of, eBay for too much money. And that's when the police contacted me. And so, of course, I was like, wow, the fact that this guy named Bob called me about your listing, and that I was able to be part of restituting a stolen artifact. It was very moving to me. But I certainly, it was a girlfriend of mine who's a photographer, Zoe Korsher, said, you have to go to Best Buy, buy a camera, and get in the car and drive it, So the next thing I knew, I couldn't even aim the camera in the right direction. I think the idea of being an artist is having a gearbox in your car that has an E gear, and that's E for elliptical, right? And so you can be going, fifth gear all forward, and then suddenly you're like, well, wait a minute, let's go to elliptical, and then we'll go into reverse. It's being open to these moments that I would call a lightning bolt moment. Like when something is happening to you, we so often compare ourselves as creative people to other people's journeys. And what I try to look around is like, what is this thing that's happening only to me, or like, why was I drawn to, this stone? Why did I feel it, and to have had, if you had told me that I was going to buy it, take care of it, and then figure out that where it had been stolen from, in this very haphazard way, I you couldn't make it up. You know, I'll never forget, I was driving to Nebraska and I said to someone on the phone, oh, I'm staying with a woman I met on eBay. Like, what? But it's this thing too, this sense I have that there are people in any place, in any culture, in any country that you can find and you can connect to, right? When you sort of go along that line of human decency, of caring, of understanding that this thing was important, but not having the answer. You know, so often we want the epiphany to be now. But for me, the epiphany is showing up every day, and then it comes. You know, that epiphany of Lena took a decade, right? I certainly learned so much respect for people who make movies after making that, you know. So, like, what it takes to make a documentary film is really, it's extraordinary. So I admire what you do. It really is this act of showing up, and showing up for the things that are, you know, for you. You, Michael, me, Alexandra, and that's, you know, when I have taught art in schools, I'll always say, you know, it's not about becoming an artist, it's about having the most creative life that you can make. And one where you are, this is, you know, happy. Like, it really is that fundamentally. So I pursue those things that make me curious and that connect me to people I never would have met otherwise. So I hope that answers your question, but thank you. I really appreciate the spirit of.
Thank you for that lovely and in-depth answer. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it off to Emily.
Okay, bye, Michael.
Hi, Alexandra. I'm Emily Lawrence. I'm a local board member, and I'm thrilled that you're here with us. Thank you so much for taking the time. So I love this phrase that you used just earlier today, actually, around abstract language. Like, I think to take a step back from that, I think just broadly thinking about classifying artists and painters, it's sort of like, oh, well, is their work conceptual, or is it abstract, or is it representational? And then when I think about language, I think often we're using language specifically because we don't want to be open, we want to be closed, or we want to be as specific as possible in our interpretation in order to be able to, like, somehow burrow into somebody else's mind and hope that we're using the same word. And then when I looked at these large, beautiful works, the language is not, like, the actual form of the words is front and center. It's not obscured. It's not, there's not a palimpsest, right? It's very, very clear. And then the form of the rest of the work is very abstract. Like, we've got these bold lines, we've got these sort of drips and blobs, but it made me recognize in there that when you use this term abstract language, that, like, the form is very, the form of the paintings are very abstract. The form of the text is very, seems like it could be very literal. And I'm interested in how you limit what else is in the painting itself. Like, I don't see any other sort of representation. So is that too much? Like, how do you think about the colors and tones that you want to be in a piece, and how much will, like, guide a specific interpretation, and what is, like, too on the nose?
Thank you for that question. You know, in every series I do, I set up a series of parameters, you know, choose the language and sort of delve into sort of my connections to the story, the narrative. And in this case, you know, it's this voice of Antigone. But what the myth is about for me, and Cassandra talked a little bit about it in the video when she was touring the exhibition, is it's a conflict, but really a dance between the rule of law. So I have these ruled lines, and then the messiness of life, which are these pores or stains. And for me, it's the three elements. So it's the ruled lines, the pores of paint, and the text that set every painting off. I'll start, you know, with the words first, and then do the pores, and then add the lines, and then it's the accretion over time of trying to bring all these things into a balance. It's not necessarily a harmony, but it's like that these things coexist. You know, I love it like they do for us in daily life. So I'm also thinking a lot about the history of abstract painting at the same time. You know, that when we think about lines, we can think about Jasper Johns, and we can think about Frank Stella. You know, pores are Morris Lewis and Helen Frankenthaler, Sam Francis. But then when you put language into what is a language of abstraction, it really pops it in a different way, and it brings it to now, right? That we're living in a world of image dominated communication, of memes, where we have text and image. And this is not, I'm not trying to make memes. Does that make sense? I'm trying to almost make an anti-meme, like where you can return to it again and again, and you'll find something different each time, where you can lose yourself. Like I find myself sometimes staring at the paintings, this is like later on, and just sort of thinking about like letting my mind meander. And then I hit a word and I'm like back to a different kind of reading. And so again, it's to me, it's like, I want to be able to get lost in the imagination, and to think about how what we're perceiving so deeply affects how we're feeling. And language and abstraction work upon that, give that permission. I think that's why people, love to have these experiences of going and looking at paintings or large sculptures that maybe aren't so simple in their meaning, because it allows for that experience of completion through rumination and letting the imagination run wild.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. So I think that we're going on to the next part of today, which is a game.
We are. Speaking of abstracted language.
Should we all play it together? So I have a project for everyone who's with us here on camera and the audience who's here with us. Thank you for joining us today. And what we're going to do is something really simple. So grab a piece of paper, grab your pen, and for 30 seconds, I just want you to draw a picture of a frog. Just draw your best frog. We have frog music. We're going to take this very seriously. Okay, I'm working on it too. All right. Is anyone counting? So the reason
30 seconds.
Is it 30 seconds? I think it's 30 seconds. So the reason, when we use the word frog, you would think we're all pretty much in agreement with what a frog is, right? So I want everyone to just take a minute and put their frog up. Don't laugh at mine. Wow, that's a great frog. Emily can draw.
Emily.
That's cool. Here's mine. I don't know how to draw a frog.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Wow, that's Michael. It's amazing.
Oh, here's my frog.
Oh my, I don't even know. Is that from above? A cross section?
I put a hat on him.
Oh,
Yeah, you're green. It's great. Oh,
And so you can all see I have the
Really
skills
rapid.
of an elementary, actually of a nursery school drawer.
What I love about this, and just if you're listening along at home and you're looking at your frog, you can see that if an alien came down and looked at all our drawings and thought that we were drawing the same thing, they would not believe it, right? So when we have complex conversations about things like love, for example, how we each interpret that and then put it back into the world is so different. If you think that our frogs are completely unrecognizable one from the other. So I'd like to just ask you all, first, thank you all so much for such a wonderful welcome to the local family. It's been an incredible process of getting to know you all. But I would like to end by having everyone draw love, their interpretation of love. And you already know what mine's gonna look like, so. All right. Here's mine. Who's next? Michael? Oh, yeah.
Michael and I went the same direction.
I love it. Aw.
Minus words.
Oh.
Amelia.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So, hi, Alexandra.
Hi, Allison.
And hi, Michael and Emily and Lindy and Jordan and Pasha. I want to invite everybody at home to send us a picture of you and your drawings. You can send it to info@localtheatreco.org, and we're going to post them all on our website and make a community bulletin board where we can share our frogs and our love together. So take a picture, send it in. We want to see it. Alexandra, it's amazing to see you. I feel like I just saw you yesterday at a cafe, and I also feel like I haven't seen you in 100 years. Is there anything else that you want to share with us about the artistic experiment that we just did? Any other thoughts?
No, I just really want to thank everyone for being so open to trying it, and to really, to be so conscious of how, how text and image are related. That we think, we're in an era where we're, especially in the US, we're discussing really complex ideas, right? And when you take a minute and you say, like, we can't even agree on what a frog is. We have no agreement. Each one of us has an interior frog that is so different. I don't even know what Pesha's frog is. So it's just to take that consciousness of when we're using words to really think, let's take a minute and to understand that it's so deeply personal to each one of us. And when we're trying to express it, we might be seeing it from above, from the side, on a lily pad, from an angle that we, just to take that time to be more conscious in our use of language with each other, and to understand that it is deeply defined by who we are, where we're coming from, and where we see ourselves going. So let's, be more conscious with our frogs, take care of our frogs.
And with our love.
And our love especially.
Especially our love. Well, speaking of love, I just wanted to thank you for your incredibly generous donation to Local Theater Company. To everyone at home, I'm really excited to share that Alexandra has donated 10 Grant Love prints that were made by Alexandra and printed by Jesse Parot. And we're really excited to be able to offer them to everyone today. Right now, you could actually scan the weird little box there, and it'll take you right to the internet where you can buy one.
Are so organized. It's so cool. I love what you're doing at the local, and the fact that you've commissioned 10, playwrights to write 10 plays during this time. So this is just offering you a little love for the love that you're offering to artists and the possibilities that you're creating. So you guys are so cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. That means a lot to us. We lead with our hearts here. And if people are not, especially playwrights and storytellers, are not telling stories now, which is one of the most important times in our history, we have to be ready with those stories so that when we can begin to gather again, if it's in a year, if it's in 18 months, we have to be able to start telling those stories. And we're just today was really special. I'm so glad that you got to meet everyone at Local and to spend some time with us. And hopefully this is the beginning of a new friendship for us with you. And we're just incredibly excited. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
It's great to see you too. Thanks to the whole team.
Okay, bye. So this is an incredible day. Thank you all so much for everybody who's joined us at home. As Alexandra mentioned, this year Local Theater Company is celebrating our 10th season, and tomorrow we're going to announce the 10 new local lab projects that Local Theater Company is committed to developing this season. For those of you who know us, many of you today on the stream do not. Our lab's usually live. Typically, we develop 3 plays, but this season, as we said, is more important than ever that we continue to develop new work, to amplify the voices of playwrights, and to invest in our community, to engaging, hiring theater artists when almost every single theater in the country is dark or operating in a very limited capacity. So there's a number of ways that you can support us. One, if you have not already, we invite you to join us and become a member, or even more meaningfully, to become a patron. You can go to our website to sign up and learn more. And a perk is that members get archived recordings of all of our Living Room local events. We're going to have 10 this year. Another way to support our theater and our work is by donating to the local Love Fund. And so today, the first 10 people to donate a minimum of $100 will receive one of the Grant Love prints. But I'm going to ask you guys to stretch in your giving if you can. Truthfully, theater artists need support now more than ever. And our local Love Fund supports the new play development that we're doing. It keeps playwrights and theater professionals working and creating. I want to thank Alexandra Grant again for a wonderful afternoon. I want to thank Pesha and everyone who participated today. And I welcome you. I look forward to welcoming you back for our next Living Room Local, which will be on Monday, 21st, which is the winter solstice. And we're going to have a listening party where we can celebrate the release of the album Discount Ghost Stories, Colorado. It's Local Theater Company's first musical and our first original album. So I'll see you on the solstice, and I wish all of you a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.